Despite everything, there is one glaring similarity between the unordinary world and ours. Only the powerful are able to influence the outcome of something. They decide whether to use their abilities for others or to keep it for themselves. What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's your boy, the one and only almighty Anon, bringing you another episode of Unordinary Analysis. I know it's been like about a month since the last episode. I went through some trials and tribulations in my personal life and everything, and I was just super unmotivated, but I kept bringing some content for you guys. I was just playing a bunch of games and no commentary type stuff for that, so I apologize about the delay. I know there's some people who are super hyped about this Unordinary series, and you probably thought I fell off with it or something, but rest assured, I am back with chapters 21 through 25. As always, I highly recommend for you to go check out Unordinary for yourself, as I choose to omit a lot of details to incentivize you to go read it. Unordinary is a manga on an app or a website, depending on your platform, called Webtoon, which you can access for free from your web browser, your Android or iOS devices. So, without further ado, let's get into the analysis. 21 opens in the evening at John's apartment. John's alerted to the sound of his phone ringing, and we see he's getting a call from dear old Dad. Dad tells John not to do anything dumb with the Ember attacks that have been going on before rushing off of the phone. It's a bit odd though, isn't it? If Dad's worried John would get caught wrong place, wrong time, Dad would have just said, be safe, be careful, don't go out at night, etc. But instead, Dad told him, don't do anything stupid. But why? Is it because John's read Unordinary, a book which inspired the vigilantes that have been getting killed by Ember, or is it something more? Then we transfer over to Serafina in her dorm, open on the first page of Unordinary. She ends up reading a bit and tossing the book aside before going out for a walk. On her stroll, she ponders over the issues with Unordinary, even going as far as to say it challenges the entire structure of our current society. It's so strange to me, and it's not necessarily in a bad way, just how much impact this book had in this society. I mean, think about if our world went to shit every time a Captain America or a Batman comic came out. Our field of fiction would change so drastically with the barring of this media, but also, why does it carry so much weight as it does? We don't have a surge of vigilantes on the street every time Marvel creates a movie, yet Unordinary seems to have this sort of pull. Elaine pops into Sarah's room with some orange juice and a note, which, ew? I mean, do you know how long she could be gone for? Dumbass. Anyway, on her way out, Elaine recognizes Unordinary on Sarah's bed, and before we can get a reaction from her, the chapter ends. Chapter 21 really leans into the themes and influences of the in-universe book Unordinary, between John and his dad talking about Ember and the Vigilantes, and Sarah now having read the book and reflecting on it. Will she end up turning into a vigilante? I mean, if she does, who would John blame more, himself or his dad? When we start chapter 22, we see Sarah returning from her reflection walk, and she sees Elaine's juice and note from earlier. She immediately checks to see if Unordinary is still where she left it. We cut over to Elaine, who's Googling Unordinary, and upon discovering the effects it's had on people, she panics. Naturally, she calls Arlo and tattles to him. John and Sarah are on Wellston's roof when she tells him, I don't think I can give that book back to you. She explains that she won't let her possession of the book get back to him, which is honestly a pretty big flex. But think about it. Unordinary was banned because of its controversial world take, which inspired vigilantism and challenged the government. This isn't a book that got banned because it was collectively agreed to be disturbing, but because it posed a threat to societal structure and governmental control. You have to imagine that there will be heavy consequences to being discovered as an owner of a copy. Sarah gives her opinion on the book, and John offers his insight on it. This frame specifically gets called back to a few times throughout the series. The chapter then ends, and honestly, This chapter gives a lot to chew on if you choose to dig a bit deeper. Obviously, read the chapter for yourself so you have the full scope to work with, but to me it raises questions. For example, what happened to John and his dad when the book got published and immediately banned? How long did it take to get banned, and what were the repercussions they faced during that time? How does John's dad still get to work after this smear that happened to his name? We open chapter 23 in Wellston's library, and we find out that Remy's back from Arlo's aforementioned family emergency. She asks what she's missed, and Blake tells her about the Turf Wars incident. Remy shocks Blake by telling him she pretty much can't do anything about it, and that it's about time that fight happened anyway. We find out Remy's family emergency was a funeral, her brother's funeral. Then we hop over to a classroom, John's classroom, where he's struggling. Bad memories fill his focus, and we get to see a much younger John who's in middle school. John calls the kids standing over him lowlives, which is kind of odd considering we haven't seen John act so cutthroat. But then there's a familiar frame, one we saw in an earlier chapter. Y'all remember now that you're seeing it? John snaps his pencil and gets yanked out of his trance. Out in the hall, shortly after the classroom scene, John and Arlo bump into each other again, but less cordially this time. Arlo takes note of John's grades, all C's and B's, before kneeling down to help John out. Arlo then dips out, John looking content and Arlo looking sinister before the chapter ends. We open chapter 24 with Eisen asking Arlo why he called him. Basically, he wants info on John. He wants anything to help him understand how John's in one of the top schools and gets away with surviving. When Eisen is understandably confused, Arlo delivers this absolutely fucking cold line before threatening him. John's cruising along when he comes upon this paper titled The Death Pool with a bunch of tally marks on it. Now, obviously, it's named in such a way that alludes to Deadpool from Marvel, which to me is neat because it's a superhero manga referring indirectly to superhero comics. But look closer. Does ecstatic sound familiar? We first heard that name a while back when John and Sarah were at the Woba Boba during an Ember report, making this the third time we've been pulled out of the current events of the plot to focus on these heroes or vigilantes dying. Just something I wanted to point out for y'all to chew on. Our King John, freshly pissed off from seeing the death pool, witnesses the anti-bullying school system policy at its finest. No hesitation, no fear. John absolutely obliterates this bully's cheekbones. We get to see John's scary voice speech bubbles, which only ever come out when he's very unhappy, before he has to Taylor Swiftly dodge and ruin this man's whole career. John ultimately spares the bully's life, and we find out that our little rat saw everything. Before the chapter ends, we get this really sick visual of Remy having electrocuted the death pool flyer with a single name left unburned. Ecstatic. This is a peak example of show, don't tell, a writing practice that has characters or events take place and provide explanation for something. Static obviously refers to electricity, and we know Remy recently had a death in her family, and we got a reminder of her power of electricity. And I'll mention again how we saw the Ember report of the death of Ecstatic. That, in my opinion, was a beautiful chapter. Oh, and we got these two scales as well. Chapter 25 picks back up with Remy, now visiting Serafina and Elaine's dorm. Remy pops into Sarah's room and immediately notices the bear on the dresser, which has some sort of microchip in it. Sarah asks why she keeps looking at the bear, and Remy explains. She takes it out and discovers it's actually a transmitter. And if I had to guess, it's probably feeding its location to whoever started Chapter 12. Y'all remember how there was people tracking people? Crazy. Anyway, Sarah flashes back to the guy at the mall and how contestants win a prize if they measure at 5 or above. This, to me, is awesome writing. Readers may be suspicious when seeing a prize event like that, but in universe, it makes perfect sense to exist. Think about those like How Hard You Can Punch machines, or the classic Hammer Carnival game, you know, the one with the bell at the top. Stuff like this exists, and we don't bat an eye at it. I mean, we're not expecting to discover like the next Hulk running around just because of these things. So neither would the Wood World characters be confused by it. Then we switch gears to Eisen, who's been frantically searching for information on John. He's realized there's a conflict between what he's seen and what he's been told, and develops a plan that honestly, it makes a lot of sense if you ask me. He approaches John under the concept of writing an article about low tiers. John says he'd love to, but he asks if it can wait, to which Eisen says No. Okay, I know this has been a long-awaited chapter, and I apologize that it's only, or episode, I should say, and I know it's only been 5 chapters, but I wanted to bring you guys quality. I don't want to sit here and just, like, stress out 10 chapters in a row and not really sink my teeth into any of them. I've had some people ask me, like, oh, why are you doing, such short segments? It offers me more, not only patience, but opportunity to really gnaw on some of the subjects and some of the scenes and whatnot, as opposed to making these long videos where I do like 10 chapters and I try to chew on everything, or I do like 10 or 15 chapters but I just breeze through it. Granted, I'm not necessarily covering the plot frame for frame, but I do want to give you guys enough of the plot that if you don't decide to read it yourself, that's okay. You'll just be missing out on a couple of the cooler details, like seeing the fight scenes in their fully, or hearing full explanations for stuff. It's give and take. I want to give you guys the opportunity to read it for yourself, and I want to give you enough of the plot to be able to follow along with just this series if you so choose. But I also want to take your attention away from anything else that's going on YouTube and make you really want to watch this series. So I got to keep you interested. You know what I mean? So thank you so much for all your patience. We just recently broke 200 subscribers, which to me is insane. I started this, I think it was November 7th of 2022, and as of recording this, it's September 2nd, 2023. So to be just shy of a year of doing YouTube and to have 200 or so of you guys that have all been sticking around, I really, really appreciate it. So thank you so much for all the love and support. Without further ado, I hope you have a wonderful night.